What is going on, listeners? I have to tell you, I'm tired. Like, I'm exhausted. I'm on like third cup of espresso level of exhaust, which is pretty intense, being that it's just barely noon when I'm recording this. And part of that is because it's the start of the year and because I have this massive sense of overwhelm of trying to get so many things done in this perceived finite amount of time so that I feel like I've gained momentum, that I'm starting the year ahead, that I'm moving forward on the right foot. Well, that could lead to some burnout, and I might be feeling a little bit of that right now. So that's what we're going to dive into today on the show, which is how to avoid burnout right at the start of the year. All right, let's dive in. Are you tired of the endless stream of fantasy marketing and vanity metrics? Yeah, so am I. My name is James Patrick, and I'm an internationally published photographer, media specialist, and marketing strategist. I'm also a student of professional development, and like you, I've been left frustrated by all of this influencer-driven generic advice, making us think that we are just one course, conference, or manifestation away from the life of our dreams. We need to cut through this crap and move beyond the posturing, beyond the facade, beyond the image to take real action on the real work that will create the real results. This is the Beyond the Image podcast. My guest today, no stranger to the show, the one and only Dr. Meredith Butulis. Meredith, how you doing today?
I am doing wonderful, James. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I appreciate you jumping on. So, I was kind of like leading into the show, like this time of year, if listeners are anything like me, I feel like a little bit extra stressed because even though it's the start of the year, I feel like I really have to do so much to get ahead or to gain momentum or to make sure that I don't fall behind as I'm going through the first quarter, entering the second quarter. Um, what have you noticed in regards to entrepreneurs and why this kind of system or impact is really impacting so many entrepreneurs right now?
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely seen that here as well. And we have a little phrase around here and over in Florida, and it's called "Don't wait to start running until your feet hit the ground." Because I think we've all heard, you hit the ground running. But I'm like, run through midair and just start with those New Year's resolutions and tackle them. And I think we all feel that sense of refresh in the new year. And we say, it's the brand new year. I have resolutions. I have goals. Maybe they sat down with your fantastic planner and they set these goals and they've even been to your sessions. But it's great because people have a plan, right? And when you have
Hmm.
a plan, it's easy to see what you need to do and where you need to go. But sometimes we just try to bite it off all at once.
Hmm.
And then we're literally running through the air with no pavement to support us. And all of a sudden, we're just like flailing in so many directions. And then we're like, forget this. This is terrible. And then you just crash. And then you need coffee at noon and 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. and every single hour of the day to barely halfway function.
Hmm. One of the things that I experience, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, is like I'm really good at, and that you mentioned the legacy planner. I'm really good at creating different time frames to execute my tasks. So I know, for example, that with the conference, I don't need to worry about, let's say, speakers right now because that's a February task. But even though I know it's a February task and it's charted out to be a February task, I still feel the need to get ahead and to almost burn myself out so that it's like this kind of desire to get ahead with also a fear of falling behind and trying to find some sort of balance between the two, even though like I'm in my 10th year of hosting this conference. I know it is absolutely fine to wait to February to start my speaker search. What is your experience kind of like with this kind of weird chasm of attempting balance?
I think I would be worried if most entrepreneurs weren't there right now. And
Hmm.
the reason why is because you know what you have to do, and maybe it's all tasked out and planned out, but yet you always want to try to stay one step ahead of yourself so you don't fall behind, but yet you're falling behind because you're trying to stay one step ahead of yourself. And I think in all of that, we're being maybe so task oriented that we're losing track of our overall wellness and our dimensions of wellness. And too many other things go by the wayside, things that we weren't even aware that we needed to tend to or put in our planner in order to experience life at its best and stay out of this burnout spiral.
I'd love for you to expand on that. What are some areas that we're overlooking? Um, I have some theories, and I bet if I pulled up my planner, I might find some of these things missing, but I'd love for you to touch on that.
Sure. So in my work, it goes back to the dimensions of wellness, and there are 8 of them. I know some of the listeners will be familiar, but many won't. So I'm just going to list them off just to give some background here for the listeners.
Mhm,
So the 8 areas of wellness that we have to be mindful of attending to really at all times are physical, spiritual, emotional, occupational, intellectual, environmental, financial, and social. And I think so many times we're focused on something like a conference or hosting an event or launching something or creating this new connection that many of those things never even make it into the planner. And
mhm,
that's where things start going in that downward spiral of chaotic, out of control, burnout, and you hit burnout and then you say, well, you kind of forget to do anything at all.
mhm. Can you go through that list again? I wanna make sure I got them all.
Yeah. So the 8 that I really think people need to have at least somewhere in their radar. The first one is physical,
Mhm,
then spiritual, emotional, occupational, intellectual, environmental, financial, and social. And they're really not in any order. It's more like a circular pie shape.
mhm.
You want to fill your whole pie tin.
Yeah. Now, it's easy to kind of wrap my head around what some of these mean. Like I understand physical well-being. Like that makes sense to me. I can understand spiritual and emotional. Um I can understand financial, I can understand social. But let's start with occupational. What does occupational kind of break down into?
For sure. In every category, I think we need to make sure we are replenishing our own cup and not just giving. So, in the occupational wellness category, I think all of us are used to giving. You're saying you have to get this event done, you have to get this freemium out there, you have to get every level of your audience nurtured. And you're just giving, 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 giving. But we lose our fulfillment in whatever that is by not replenishing. And when I say replenishing, what books are you reading in your industry? What
Mhm.
podcasts are you listening to in your industry? What conferences are you going to? What continuing ed are you going to? How are you investing in yourself so that you are more efficient and effective and more in depth at what you are providing? Because that's really the only way to generate that continued excitement is you have to keep refilling your own plate because after a while you just sound like a broken record if you're just giving out the same thing all the time because you're not taking in ideas from others.
Another one I'd love for you to expand on is social. Um, what does this kind of get defined as, and why are entrepreneurs, particularly, um, entrepreneurs, the older they get, why is this something that should be a core focus?
Absolutely. So think about it this way. What would happen if you hypothetically moved to a new state and didn't know somebody? That's actually happened to me and happened to many listeners, but not everybody has that experience. But hypothetically, what would happen? And when you're in that new place, you probably do one of two things. Either you retreat into your own shell and just rely on phone calls to people that you knew before or Zoom calls to people you knew before, or you start massively looking for people everywhere and just shelling out energy in 5,000 directions.
Mhm.
Neither one of these things is actually healthy. One of them is at the center of the pie saying, my cup is empty, my pie tin is empty. And the other one is saying, well, my pie tin is overflowing with efforts that are directed in multiple directions and scattered all over the place. So you're just not going to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
So social relationships look at, who are your people that you can go to and talk about things and ask for help. And I know that's so hard as an entrepreneur because you don't want to ask for help, right? You just want to do and be sufficient and be enough. We hear that all the time, especially in the social media world. You're like, you have to be enough. And we're like, what does that even mean anymore? So um, we have to look at those relationships like, who can we ask for help? Who can we lean on? Who can we talk to when the going gets tough? And it's probably different people for different situations. Like if you're having a financial struggle, that might be a way different person than if you're having a spiritual struggle.
Mhm.
And then we also need to look at how are we giving and nurturing in every relationship, because relationships only work when there's mutual energy and mutual give and take going into them. So if we're just dumping into one relationship and we're saying, I want more for this person than they want for themselves, that's not going to work either. Like you have to
Mhm.
think about, what do these people want? What energy are they coming with on a scale of 0 to 10? And what am I putting into it? Because if they're coming to me with a 10 out of 10 energy and I'm giving them a 0 out of 10, that relationship's going to fizzle. If they're
Yeah.
coming to me with a 6 out of 10 and I give them a 6 out of 10, that relationship's going to keep on going. So we have to really think, what's the energy match of what is each person or each party bringing to the relationship that is either new or nurturing or maybe about to move on to something else.
Like, I'm reflecting back to when, this might have been 8 or 9 years ago, and when I would write out my annual goals or my plans for the year, if you were to go through it, 100% business focused. There were no goals for my health. There were no goals for um, my connections in my life or the relationships I had in my life. There were no goals for my own mental nourishment and well-being. And as I've gotten older, I've had to be very conscious because it's so easy just to set business metrics. Okay, here's like if I look at my board to my right, there's a list of 20 different KPIs, key performance indicators that I'm trying to hit by the end of the year. So I'm watching all these things. So every one of those things is a goal per se. And it's just easy to get so myopic and focus there. But I had to be very intentional with, okay, what goals am I setting for myself in my physical health? What goals am I setting for myself in my relationships as a friend, my relationships as a husband, as a father? Um, what goals am I setting for my I intellectual well-being or my mental nourishment? So I do find that setting certain goals, even though it's metric based, it allows me to give it space. And if
Hmm.
I don't set it as a goal, I might not give it space because, well, I can just work on these KPIs over here. So whether it's, well, I want to read 40 books this year. Okay, that's a goal that is all about my mental nourishment. I have another one that I want to get involved in some social club this year, that I do on a regular basis. And the idea is I want to develop a hobby, but the critical factor is it has to be a social club, meaning I can't get into, I don't know, woodworking, which I would just do by myself in a wood shop. It has to be something where I'm able to connect and meet and converse with other people. So that's something I had to really train myself to do. Now, for those listening to this show, what advice would you give on identifying if there is an issue for them and how to really hone in on the issue? Because some people might just be feeling tired. Some people might just be feeling lazy or, maybe I'll work on my goals in a little bit. Maybe they're just kind of putting it off a little bit. What is the thing that separates just being a little tired and just not feeling it versus actual burnout? And how do we kind of recognize the difference?
Oh, absolutely. That's such a good question. I think the first step is really looking at the 8 dimensions of wellness because that is very, very comprehensive in the psychology world to say, if I had to rate my own health and well-being and satisfaction on a scale of 0 to 10 in each of these dimensions, so physical, meaning like how's your physical body, spiritual, how's your relationship with anything outside yourself, it doesn't necessarily have to be a formal entity. How's your emotional well-being, your ability to respond, handle stress, how's your satisfaction with what you're doing and what you're receiving for what you are doing, how is your intellectual well-being, how, do you feel like you're refilling your cup in terms of the knowledge that you need to bring forward to serve your audience and what they're asking. How's your environmental well-being, as in that doesn't have to be a Greenpeace thing, but it can be. That just might be looking at your living room and going, wow, that big red burgundy beanbag is blocking my thoughts, because that's happened to me before, actually, literally. um, how financially can you afford things beyond the basics? Can you even afford the basics? Social well-being, how are those relationships in terms of energy? And then look at each one of those 8 dimensions and rate yourself on a scale of 0 to 10, honestly. And then even better, have somebody else who knows you rate you on a scale of 0 to 10 and see, are there discrepancies? Are there areas where you say, wow, I'm a 10 out of 10 in my occupational wellness, but I'm a 0 out of 10 in my physical wellness? Because once we identify where is that imbalance, the pie pieces that are just so tiny, those are the ones you want to go after. Those are the ones that need a space in your legacy planner, because it means that you've neglected them. And
Mhm.
when you start neglecting pieces, the pie becomes unbalanced. That's not terrible if we know it's temporary. So if you know, okay, I really just need to be imbalanced for this one project for the next 12 weeks, and then we're going to restore my balance, that's okay. But if there's no end date in sight, burnout's going to show up. And then
Mhm.
burnout shows up as, okay, well, I missed the goal on Tuesday. Grant myself grace. There's a lot going on. That's fine. And then I missed the goal Wednesday. That's okay. It's a tough week. All right, grant myself grace. That's okay. And then 3 weeks later, you're still granting yourself grace for the exact same thing. That's something that needs your attention. It doesn't mean you can't work on that goal. It just means there's an imbalance there. And it's not just throwing a band-aid over it or throwing it out. It's saying there is something here and you need to figure out what that is.
I love this visual cue of like putting this in a pie chart because I think a wheel, and each one of these facets is like a different spoke on this wheel. And if you have spokes that are much longer than others, well, you're going to have a clunky wheel and it's not going to
Love that.
roll very smoothly. Um, and I also like that you put forth that like it's okay to have these temporary imbalances as you're shifting focus from one area to another. Like if I'm on vacation, hey, this is all about social, this is all about intellectual, this is all about the environment I'm in, this is all about the connections I'm having, or nourishment. Like, yeah, but that's, I'm on vacation a week or two and then okay, back to work. And if I'm on deadline with the project, okay, yeah, I'm going to put forth a lot more time and energy there. And maybe I don't work out for an hour that day. Maybe I just go for a 20-minute walk just to get the blood flowing in the middle of the day, but I want to readjust that then in that next week. So I love this idea. How often do you think we should be kind of self-assessing these numbers? Like, is this something we should be doing on a weekly basis? Should we do like a quick version of it daily? Is it less frequent?
I encourage people to look at it at least every 30 days. So we're going to look at your clunky wheel and we're going to say, what parts of this clunky wheel need a little filling out to make it more of a round wheel? Because the wheel, I love that wheel. I call it the pie, but you call it the wheel. I like the wheel better. The wheel is only going to roll and keep on rolling and pick up momentum in the direction we want it to if it's rounded out, right?
Mhm.
So I recommend a minimum of every 30 days. You set it in calendar, you put a date in your calendar, and you reassess your wheel. But if something just feels off, you kind of get that intuitive sense like, oh, I'm drained. I'm pounding the caffeine at 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock. That's PM and AM. That's a sign. You gotta look at that and say, you know what? If I'm doing that, I am most certainly detracting from my health. And if you detract from your health, you only get one health bucket. So you got to be a little bit cautious with that one.
It's reminiscent, and I believe I have shared this story with you, Meredith, where um, I was on a trail run many years ago and came across this cactus in the distance, this very tall saguaro cactus, and from the distance and from my vantage point, it looked like this giant 20-foot tall, healthy, very robust cactus. Then I started running down the trail and I came up to it, and now I could see the whole cactus. The bottom third, which was the view was obstructed from my earlier vantage point, and the bottom third of it was all rotted out, and it was down to the ribs, the skeleton of the cactus. And maybe that cactus lasts one more monsoon season, probably not two, before a strong enough wind is going to kick in. It's going to snap those ribs, and that cactus is going to fall and it's going to die. And this is the imbalance that I see so many entrepreneurs, including myself. Like, this is, guilty as charged, which is, well, I'm going to dedicate time for my health once I get my business where it needs to be. I'm going to dedicate time or make space for relationships after I get the business where the business needs to be. Or, you know what? I'm going to make time to enjoy my free time once I get the business where it's going to need to be. And I will tell you, running businesses for 20 years, the business will always get to where it needs to be, but where it needs to be, that marker keeps getting moved. Because I'm like, oh, I'll just move the marker. I'll just move the marker, just move the marker. But all those other facets of my life, my health, my connections, and my mental well-being, those keep getting delayed. They keep getting paused because of this idea that we have to continuously pursue this business venture. But what is the outcome of this? You're not going to live long enough to see it get to anywhere you want it to go, A, or B, if it ever does get there and you ever stop moving the finish line, you're going to be so stressed out, so burnt out, and you're going to be alone if you don't have a heart attack before then. So, congratulations. This is what you've built for yourself. And that's a very uncomfortable and stark reality that a lot of us are forging towards. And it's only when we, I think, paint that picture of how scary that future is, because if we're not being very clear that that is a terrible future to aspire to, that is not an ideal, that's not an aspiration. We're just going to keep doing what's in front of us, the same thing over and over and over again. But when we pause to reflect and be like, this is the outcome if this wheel is imbalanced, that you will be so stressed it will impact your health, or you will not take care of your health, so you won't live long enough to see it get anywhere. Or yeah, it'll get somewhere, but you're not going to have a single freaking person to celebrate this with because you've not given any space to nurture relationships. So I think that's why this is so critically important. It's just when you forecast in the future long enough and you make that future scary enough, that's, I think, what's going to propel you into action today.
Absolutely. I love those analogies because it's like if we keep running on that clunky wheel and keep depleting it, you literally turn into that quarter third dead cactus. And sure enough, fall over and that's it. You're just done. And then, we reach that ultimate really that ultimate fear of life, which is, you fall short of your goals because honestly as an entrepreneur, the target keeps moving. You can
Mhm.
never you can never achieve your goals because the target keeps moving. Like, you achieve a goal, you check it off, but then a new one shows up, right? It's like playing whack-a-mole with 10,000 moles at one time. You're like, "Whack, whack, whack, whack." And then all of a sudden you're just depleted. So, we do face that ultimate reality of if you are a true entrepreneur at heart, you're never going to achieve enough. You never will because the target keeps moving. You're going to burn yourself out. You're going to run this wheel jagged. The jagged wheel is going to run with less efficiency, and you're pretty soon you are going to end up being the cactus. You're a human version, a personification of the cactus. And then you look back and you say, what was that all for? And I do work a lot with older adults of various backgrounds, and um, I think that the biggest regrets that they say is, I wish I would have spent more time with people. I wish I would have invested more in my relationships. I wish I would have paid attention to my health and wellness and well being more. And that includes physical and emotional. I think that's becoming more prevalent in today's society. We have a lot more awareness and conversation. It's not so taboo to talk about mental health anymore.
Mhm.
And those are the things I hear these older adults saying is, wow, I wish I had somebody with me. I wish I was I wish I could have my wellness back. I wish I could have my emotional well-being back. And they're paying thousands and thousands of dollars that they don't even have now to try to get as much as they can back. But once the wheel is burned down to the axle, and a crooked one at that, there's only so much that you can get back. You can't just go back to your 20s or your teens and start over.
If we're starting to do this analysis and starting to be very honest about where we're at, and if there are areas, like if I were to do this checklist right now, I can tell you almost certainly that I feel social and environmental would be two big ones for me. Well, that's something that I can start to make some headway on. That's something I can adjust my priorities to address. What advice would you give as someone's going through and they're assessing where they're at in each of these scenarios? What do we do then? Okay, so we've acknowledged the problem exists. How do we start to build steps to move in the right direction for ourselves, and understanding that everyone's going to have a different combination of things that they want to look at?
Absolutely. So I think first, just start by figuring out which pieces of your pie or your wheel are the smallest or need the most attention. Those are the ones you're naturally going to shy away from because it's uncomfortable. And we don't want to have uncomfortable conversations with ourselves, let alone other people. But those are the
Mhm,
ones you need to lean into. Then I think the next thing, and this happens in business all the time, you compare yourself to some entity that is 5 times larger than you or 5,000 times larger than you. And you say, comparison, comparison, comparison. Get out of comparison mindset. Ditch that. You need to figure out how to take one tiny little step forward. And if you meet that step with rejection and resilience and the laundry list of the reason why you can't, it tells me the step is too big. You need to make it so ridiculously small that if you said to yourself, well, could I brush my teeth tomorrow? And you're like, nope, I can't because of this, that, and the other thing. You're like, okay, well, could I brush my teeth for 10 seconds tomorrow? And you're like, well, yeah, of course I could do that. That's the step you need to take. The one that is, well, of course I could do that. It would be silly not to do that. So you have to find and just keep breaking it down, breaking it down, breaking it down, breaking it down until you feel absolutely silly saying no to doing that.
mhm. I like this breaking something down into the absurdly simple, because if we're not thinking about it, it can become habitual. If we don't need to put a lot of time and energy into whether or not this is going to happen, it becomes far more manageable. Um, I'm trying to think of examples that I've implemented within my own life. Um, Here's one I did for a couple months, and it didn't last more than a couple months because um I'll address why. I was going to be running a 5K, and so I set this goal that I was going to run every day. That is incredibly difficult to just, like, as a whole. I'm going to run every day. Like, it's not specific. It's vague, it's not clear. Um, so I struggled with that goal. So I revised it to within the first 5 minutes of waking up, I'm going to have my shoes on. That helped me run a lot more because I could put my shoes on. The hardest part was the first 5 minutes after waking up. So, I had to create this habit of I woke up and I would have my running shoes right next to the bed. Woke up, sit up, put on my running shoes. Well, my running shoes are on now. So the next logical thing for me to do would be to go for a run. Um, it was that anchoring which really helped when it comes to setting goals like, well, I want to journal every day and I want to meditate every day. Those are still a little opaque because what constitutes journaling? What constitutes meditation? And if it's something that is not clear, A, or B, too hard to achieve, it's going to be too easy to skip it. So for me, it's I'm going to write down at least one sentence, just one sentence. Most times I do a page or two, but one sentence. I could write one sentence. I could have a fever of 105 and still write one sentence. Um, I'm going to breathe for 60 seconds. I breathe all day long. I just have to choose 60 of those seconds to be intentional about it. All right. So these are things that are incredibly stupid simple, but I don't skip them because they're so stupid simple. And it puts me in that place physically, emotionally, energetically to do it even more. Like, oh, I've journaled one sentence. I'm here. I might as well just journal a few more sentences. Or well, I breathe for 60 seconds. And sometimes that's enough. I'm done. I want to be done. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I like this. I want to stay in this. Right. Is that kind of am I reflecting this accurately?
I love that. Your examples are so wonderful because you're tying it into triggers, the concept that we call triggers, which means that you're tying it to something you maybe already do or something just so simple that you could do it at any time. So, for example, you get up, you put on your running shoes on. Well, now your running shoes are on. Okay, fine. I might as well run at least 5 steps, right?
Hmm.
Or I'm going to write at least one sentence. And if I feel in the moment and I've made space for it, yeah, sure. Take it on a little journey, take it on a ride, see where you end up. But you're really tying into triggers. I talk to all of my clients about triggers. I say, okay, what are you already doing? And just how could we do that more efficiently, more effectively, or maybe in some cases multitask it. So, for example, breathing. A lot of times I talk to my clients about, well, you're trying to go to sleep anyway, right? You're in bed and you're tossing and turning. Have you ever just tried some muscle relaxation and some deep breathing and some counting something other than sheep while you are trying to fall asleep? And all of a sudden, that starts making a difference. I know one of the things I tried with my partner is we made a little ritual of every night before you go to bed, you must do a partner stretch, and 30 seconds would be great. So I do a stretch. He usually likes hamstrings. I stretch his hamstrings for 30 seconds. He stretches my back for 30 seconds. Good. Done. Check the box, anchored into the bedtime routine. And our sleep efficiency has gone way up. Now I don't get those restless legs at night that bother him and keep him up all night. So sometimes you can have an accountability partner in there as well.
I like that. Okay, so we've set some ridiculously simple habits. At what point do we start to assess if it's working or not?
Well, I think that depends on your definition of working. So,
Mm, mhm.
for example, with the restless legs and the stretching, well, that was almost an immediate effect. So, yes, that's working. We're going to keep that practice. With running, it might be one of those things that you try it on for size and you say, I'm going to run a 5K. And then maybe you actually do hit that goal of running that 5K by starting with your shoes on and just adding a few steps every day. Like anything, you gradually work into it. And then you run the 5K and you're like, I don't like running. That was terrible. I would like to never do it again. Okay, great. Mark it off the bucket list and move on. Because not every idea, not every habit, not every little thing we try on for size is going to be the right thing. It might be the right thing then. It might be the right thing later. It might never be the right thing. And we have to be okay with that. But if we don't give ourselves at least a couple weeks of trying a new thing, we don't know. Like,
Mhm.
I think they say it takes an average of 21 to 30 days to build a new habit. So, for most things, I would say give yourself at least 21 to 30 days to try it. Try it on for size, be open minded, see if it starts fitting. If it's falling off the wagon and it's making you miserable, ask yourself what else you could do because maybe it's not the right thing for you at that time. Might be right later, but not right now.
That's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. Um, you could set off to do something and you realize, "I don't like this." But because you set it as a goal, you feel compelled to keep doing it. But if at some point you do an analysis and you're like, "This doesn't serve me," and I think this could be one of 2 things. It could be the action itself is not serving me. Like, an example I could think of is I was trying to go to the gym at 4 in the morning. I do not like going to the gym at 4 in the morning. I could say unequivocally, I don't enjoy it. There's nothing about that that brings me joy. Going to the gym is for many people not, well, maybe not my audience, but for most normal people, it's not the easiest thing energetically to do. Um, Going at 4 in the morning is like exponentially harder. And once you're there, it's harder to, I feel, be effective there. So I had just decided, you know what? I like going to the gym. Going to the gym at 4 a.m. doesn't work for me. So I'm going to start my days later. Because the whole reason I was going at 4 in the morning is because I needed to be back before my son woke up. So I was like, well, I'll just start going after I drop him off at school, and then I'll just start my workday later. And that works so much better for me. So there's an example of the action is not working for me. So let me revise the action. Maybe the action is something different. Maybe it's I don't want to go to the gym at all. I just love going for a long walk at the end of each day. Like, or you know what? I just like hopping on the spin bike while watching Netflix. Like that's my jam. That's what I want to do. So you can keep the goal, but you're changing the action, or you realize at some point, I don't like this goal. I've been doing this for a couple months and this is not like the outcome is not what I want. So let me
Right.
see if it's if it's in we'll just say intellectual. Let me see what else I can set as a different goal to achieve something intellectually. What advice would you give on how to assess whether or not when we should be jumping ship, whether it's on a task or whether it's on a goal itself, and how we can still find improvements if we're shifting our end goals in a certain category?
It's a great question. And I think it is going to depend a little bit on what the goal is and what the task is. But at the same time, for sure, if it's going in the wrong direction in 30 days, you need to revise it. For sure. Absolutely. With some things, it might be a shorter time frame. Like, let's say you took up running and you discover you're getting tendonitis in the
Mm,
first 2 weeks. That's a sign. Like, if you are absolutely miserable, you're in pain, and it is detracting from other areas in your life, you need to think about, do those other areas need to adjust around this new goal? Or do I need to revise the goal? So, for example, with Achilles tendonitis, I don't know, maybe you just need to go buy a different pair of running shoes.
mhm,
That's a possibility. But you could also look at it and say, you know what? Running every day isn't going to work with my human body at this point in time. So, okay, fine. I like the idea of fitness, but pain is not, that kind of pain's not okay. So maybe we're going to have to be on the spin bike one day or do something different one day. So if it is significantly causing you troubles or detracting from other areas of your life, you have to say either this needs to change or the other things around it from which it is detracting are going to have to change. And then you need to say, well, which one is realistic?
mhm. I like that. One of the things I have been doing is I've been trying to find patterns by very simply tracking different areas of my life. So I track how well I feel I slept. I track my mood, like just on a scale of 1 to 10, like how am I feeling today?
Mhm.
And I track my motivation. Those are three things I want to just put a number to, 1 to 10. Did I sleep well? What's my motivation? And what's my general mood today? And I notice that, like, so for example, last night, for whatever reason, I woke up at 2:30 in the morning. So I've been up since 2:30, couldn't fall back asleep.
Oof.
Um, Now I'm in a relatively decent mood. My motivation is fine. But I can tell you, because I've been tracking this long enough, that if I have another night or two where I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm going to notice a severe dip in both my mood and my motivation. I'm not going to feel as good, like emotionally, and I'm just not going to want to do any work. Okay. So just by tracking that, I know if I if it's getting to a certain time in the evening, I'm like, I'm just going to go to bed, because I know that if I don't, in a couple days, I'm probably not going to feel that great. And I just would rather not have to go through that. Have you found any ways that, either for yourself or that you would work with on your clients, of just different ways that they can track or check in with themselves to just see what is the temperature of what I'm trying to achieve here?
Yeah, I usually have them track 2 things. I'm so glad you brought up that relationship. One of them is sleep,
Mhm.
because for 99.99999% of the population, sleep changes everything. It changes your
Mhm.
energy, it changes your mood, it changes your interaction, it changes how other people perceive you.
Yep.
I'm not going to go into all the relationship dynamics and personality dynamics, but we all have a good side and we all have a bad side, whether we are aware of it or not. And if you start depleting that sleep over and over again, you might think you're putting your best foot forward, but others are perceiving the evil version of that, the Jekyll Hyde situation. So they're just seeing the bad version of it, even though you think you're putting the good version
Uh-huh.
out. So sleep is a huge one. Nutrition's a huge one too. I think we all know that if all you're putting into your body is sugar, caffeine, and alcohol, you're not going to be putting your best foot forward. You're not even giving yourself a chance, because literally the energy of your body, the fuel, it's like you just dumped diesel into a fuel that can't run diesel. Okay, that's not going to run
Mhm.
for very long. So I ask them to, at a very least, track the basics of what you ate. Did you eat all sugar or did you eat some food groups yesterday?
Mhm.
Did you drink all alcohol and caffeine or did you drink some water yesterday? Some sleep. And then I just ask them overall energy level, 0 to 10. And normally you'll see those correlations, but I think everybody thinks the evil side is going to show up the day after the missed night of sleep. And that's not true. Usually on an adult, you're seeing a 2 to 3 day delay, and sometimes you get a 2 week rebound effect where you're like, okay, well, I think I was okay. I think I could do that again. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks later, you are dead tired with the flu, and you're like, I don't know what just happened. Look
Yep.
back 2 weeks.
And then how much time does it take to then get better, right? It's like,
Hmm.
yeah, I have to burn so much now, but then you end up getting sick, and that's what really ends up putting you behind. I was thinking about, I had a corporate job many years ago, another lifetime ago, and um, if I were to look at, like, my occupational score, my social score, my intellectual score, my environmental score, all those were struggling at the end of this corporate job, and at some point, um, I was doing an annual review. We had to do one every year before we determined whether or not we were gonna get a raise. So I'm sitting with my boss, and he says, your numbers are good. You're closing. I've worked in marketing, so the
Sure.
sales and business development was how one of the metrics I was being graded on. Is you got good numbers. You're one of the highest converters in the region. Um, the only downside was, a couple of the other managers in the office had some anonymous concerns. And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "But, it's not a big deal. Like, your numbers are really good. Um, you know, we can just set that aside." And I'm just like, "Well, I'm just curious. What were they?" And he's like, "Well, not a big deal." He really didn't want to tell me. I'm like, "Come on. What did they
Yeah.
say?" He says, "Well, one guy said James has become abrasive and very difficult to work with."
Oh, no.
I was like, "Yeah, that's fair."
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think he's wrong. I think I've been here a little too long. I think he's probably right. I think I've
Yeah.
become a little
Yeah.
bit of a pain in the ass to work with. Um, One of the things, because I'm getting inside my listener's head, which is, well, wait, if I'm spending all this time tracking this and tracking that and going down this rabbit hole of tracking, how do I get anything done?
Right.
And I just want to urge, like, this can be very simple. Like, yes, I have my planner, which I just made check boxes in my planner to track all this up. But before I created a planner, because this is not just a shameless plug of my planner, although I'll just bring that up on screen right there. There we go.
I see
Um,
it.
I just would write it in my daily journal. Like, where am I at right now? And just a quick score. Like, these are split second assessments, but it allows me to just look at it from a bird's eye view and be like, okay, I'm noticing trends here. Because what we track, we do have that ability to improve. And I'll throw it back to you if there's anything else you want to add on the amount of time we spend tracking things.
Absolutely. And I can speak to that from experience too, just personal experience here as well, is that I used to think you had to track everything. Like I would write down every single workout I did. I would keep track of my nutrition in detail. And I'm like, you know what? This is a time suck. This is a time suck. I think it did develop my awareness surrounding certain patterns and habits, but once I had that awareness, it was intuitive. I didn't really need to be doing that anymore. But the one thing that really saved me a lot of time, and no, I do not sell Fitbits or Apple Watches or anything else, but I got myself a really basic, bottom of the line Fitbit from the local Target. And what that does for me, because I don't have these fancy Apple Watches and things I see on everybody's wrist nowadays, is it syncs to my phone. And
Mhm.
my phone will tell me how much sleep I got last night. And it'll tell me some other great statistics too that I'm so into exercise science and exercise physiology. I'd love to go on about heart rate variability and all those details that it tells you, but let's not do that right now. But that's what I look at. It's an auto sync, it's an auto trend. It tells me. And if I want to enter my mood, I can actually enter that on a scale of 0 to
Mm,
10. So it'll pick up all the key physiological stuff like how many hours of sleep did you actually get? And I just enter the mood data. So scale of 1 to 10, here you go. Scale of 1 to 10, here you go. And then I can pull it up in a weekly view, a daily view, a 3-month view, whatever I want. And I can look back at it and go, wow, I've been feeling crummy for a whole month. Like, did something happen? And then I'll look back at the old data and I'm like, oh, I mean, I thought I was sleeping 8 hours, but it says I only slept 7. That's interesting, huh?
I like that. I mean, many of us also already have this ability or this technology. Like, it can be
Mhm.
systemized and it can be made simple so that it is not overwhelming. I think that's the key. Um, this has been such a delightful and re-energizing conversation. Where can listeners go to be able to connect with you, potentially learn more about avoiding burnout as they're working through their careers?
Yeah, I do all kinds of conversations on my social media. I think the one that's just easiest to connect with for a lot of people right now is on Instagram. And I'm really easy to find there because you don't have to spell out my whole name. You don't have to spell out Meredith Butulis. Instead, it is just doc, so DOC, and then dot MNB because those are my initials. So doc.MNB because I'm a doctor. So I was like, okay, we'll just call it doc.MNB. And if they want to go on there, kind of see what's going on, or if they want to instant message me, I'm happy to get back to them if they want to DM me. I have a brand new book out. Would it be okay if I mention it and if anybody wants a free chapter or something or no?
By all
Yeah.
means, yeah.
Okay. I actually just have a brand new book that came out that relates to this topic. It's called Your Wellness Makeover. It's actually a workbook book that you do every 30 days for the 8 dimensions of wellness. Just dropped, came out on Amazon last Saturday, actually, brand new.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you so much. But if listeners do want a free chapter, and even if they want a specific chapter, they're like, I really want the one on intellectual wellness or emotional wellness or social wellness, I am happy to send them an individualized one chapter for free. So just DM me, tell me they listened on the Beyond the Image podcast, and I'd be happy to send that to them on an
That
individual
is
basis.
awesome. Thank you so much for offering that. That is really cool.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to do that.
Well, Meredith, as always, such a pleasure to have you on. Hopefully, it's not another. I don't remember the last time you were on the show. It was a couple of years ago. Hopefully, it's not 2 or 3 years before we have you back on.
No.
But congratulations again on the book, and definitely keep up all the amazing work you're doing.
Thank you so much, James. It's always a pleasure to talk, and I actually love all of your podcasts. There's just so much wonderful information on a variety of topics. So thank
Well,
you for
thank you.
hosting this podcast.
I will take that. Thank you so much.